For my anthropology thesis, I went to a mountain village where the first few days were perfect. On the fifth day, as the sun was setting, I saw all the villagers gathering in the square, surrounding an empty chair in their midst. The village leader turned to me and said, "Today, you are our special guest." The bus dropped me at the bottom of the mountain path with a warning I should have heeded. "Elderbrook only welcomes visitors when they need one," the driver said as I shouldered my backpack. "Last anthropologist who went up there never came back." I laughed it off, assuming it was local superstition. After all, Elderbrook Village had approved my research request, formally inviting me to document their isolated community's traditions for my doctoral thesis. Their acceptance letter, signed by Elder Hansen, had been enthusiastic, welcoming a fresh perspective on their unique cultural practices. The hike up took nearly 3 hours through pine forests that grew denser as I ascended. No roads led to Elderbrook. The village had famously rejected modern infrastructure, maintaining its isolation despite being just 40 miles from civilization. That was precisely what made it so valuable for my research. A community that had developed its own traditions largely untouched by outside influence for over 200 years. When I finally emerged from the tree line, I was greeted by a picturesque scene that could have been from another century. Wooden houses with steep roofs arranged in a circle around a village square. Smoke curled from stone chimneys. Vegetable gardens and flower beds burst with color. A tall, gray-haired man approached, smiling broadly. "Dr. Morgan, I presume. Welcome to Elderbrook. I'm Hansen." Elder Hansen was the perfect host. He showed me to a charming cabin at the edge of the village that would be my home for the 2 weeks of my stay. It had been prepared with obvious care, fresh wildflowers on the table, homespun blankets on the bed, and a wood stove already radiating warmth. "We eat communally," he explained. "Dinner is at sunset in the square." Those first days were a researcher's dream. The villagers welcomed me into their homes, showing me traditional crafts and telling me stories passed down through generations. I documented everything. Their governance structure centered around a council of elders, their agricultural practices that followed lunar cycles, their remarkable textile art featuring symbols unique to Elderbrook. On the second night after dinner, as we all sat around a bonfire, I asked about Elderbrook's founding. "We celebrate our founding at the summer festival," Elder Hansen explained. "That's in 3 days. You're fortunate to be here for it." The villagers exchanged glances that seemed meaningful, though I couldn't interpret them. "It's our most important tradition," a woman named Martha added. "We're so pleased you'll experience it." I noticed how often they mentioned my timing, as if my arrival had been precisely calculated rather than scheduled through correspondence. When I mentioned this to Elder Hansen, he simply smiled. "We believe strongly in fate, Dr. Morgan. The right visitor always arrives when needed." By my 4th day, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. The summer festival preparations were underway with villagers weaving elaborate flower garlands and preparing special foods. I was told the festival centered around a ritual of renewal, but details were vague despite my questions. "It must be experienced, not explained," was the common response, always delivered with that same enigmatic smile. On the 5th day, I noticed a subtle shift. Villagers who had been open became evasive. Conversation stopped when I approached. Something had changed, but I couldn't identify what had triggered the shift. That afternoon, I decided to review my notes and photographs. As I scrolled through images of the village square, I noticed something odd. In the center where gatherings were held was a circular stone pattern I hadn't paid much attention to. But looking at it now, I realized the stones formed an unusual symbol. one I'd seen repeatedly in their textiles and wood carvings. When I zoomed in on the image, I saw that the stones had small channels carved into them, all leading to a central depression. It looked almost like a drainage system. I was still pondering this when the dinner bell rang. I joined the villagers in the square where tables had been arranged in a circle around that central stone pattern. The mood was festive, but with an undercurrent of tension I hadn't felt before. Elder Hansen greeted me warmly, guiding me to a seat of honor beside him. The meal was more elaborate than previous nights. Wine flowed freely, though I noticed the villagers themselves drank little while encouraging me to have more. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elder Hansen stood addressing the gathering. "Friends, tonight we begin our summer festival with the choosing." The villagers fell silent, all eyes turning to him. I reached for my recorder, only to find it missing from my pocket. For 200 years, Elderbrook has thrived because we understand sacrifice, Hansen continued. What is freely given sustains us all. Someone began drumming a slow, steady beat that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Our visitor has learned much about us, Hansen said, smiling at me. Now it's time for her to participate in our most sacred tradition. As if on cue, the villagers stood, moving the tables aside. In minutes, they had formed a circle around the stone pattern in the center of the square. 2 men carried a wooden chair, placing it precisely in the middle. Hansen turned to me, his expression solemn. "Today, you are our special guest, Dr. Morgan. The chair awaits." The drumming intensified. Martha approached, carrying a crown of flowers which she held before her like an offering. "I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What does the choosing involve?" "Every 20 years at the summer festival, we must choose one to ensure Elderbrook's prosperity," Hansen explained. "Someone whose life force will feed the earth and protect us from hardship." The implications hit me with sickening clarity. The stone channels, the drainage system. "You can't be serious," I said, looking around for any sign that this was an elaborate performance. The villagers' faces showed only solemn purpose. "This is the 21st century. You can't just sacrifice someone." "We don't take life," Hansen corrected gently. "We transform it. Your essence will remain in Elderbrook forever, part of our soil, our water, our very being. There is no greater honor." The circle of villagers tightened, moving closer with measured steps. There was no gap, no route of escape. "Please," I said. "Martha, you can't want this." Martha smiled sadly. "We don't want it, Dr. Morgan. We need it. Without the choosing, Elderbrook would wither, the crops would fail, sickness would come." "My university knows where I am," I tried. "They'll come looking when I don't return." "They'll find evidence of a tragic accident while hiking," Hansen said. "The mountains can be dangerous for those unfamiliar with them." The circle continued to close. Martha approached with the flower crown. These friendly people had been planning this moment since before my arrival. "Will you accept the honor willingly?" Hansen asked. "Those who do experience only joy in the transformation. And if I don't?" Hansen's expression showed genuine regret. "Then the experience is different. But the outcome remains the same. May I at least return to my cabin for a moment, to prepare myself?" Hansen studied me, then nodded. "Martha will accompany you. The ritual begins at midnight." Inside the cabin, I moved around, gathering what I claimed were personal items for the ritual. My mind worked frantically. Under the bed was my field kit, including a canister of bear spray. "Could I have a moment of privacy for prayer?" I asked. Martha stepped outside but left the door ajar. I quickly retrieved the bear spray and tucked it into my pocket. When we returned to the square, Hansen met us. "It's time, Dr. Morgan. Please take your place in the center." 20 feet from the chair, I stopped, turned as if to ask Hansen a question, and in that moment pulled the bear spray from my pocket. Before anyone could react, I discharged it in a wide arc, creating a momentary gap in the human circle. I ran. Screams and shouts erupted behind me, but I didn't look back, sprinting for the dark line of trees at the village edge. The path down the mountain was somewhere there, steep and treacherous even in daylight, but my only chance. The rain began as I stumbled downward. Lightning flashed, illuminating the trail ahead in brief bursts. Behind me, torches bobbed as the villagers spread out through the forest. Eventually, the trees thinned. I could see lights in the valley below. Civilization. But between me and safety was a raging creek swollen by the rain. I edged out onto a fallen log that reached partway across. 3/4 across, I heard a crack. The log was giving way. I lunged for the far bank, fingers digging into mud as the log was swept away behind me. Through the curtain of rain, I could see dark figures with torches on the creek's far side. Elder Hansen raised a hand in what might have been acknowledgement. Then they turned, melting back into the forest, as if accepting that I had passed beyond their reach. I told authorities I'd gotten lost hiking, been caught in the storm. I said nothing about Elderbrook, their ritual. Who would believe me? When my elderly neighbor passed away, she left me her collection of antique toy figurines. After placing the toys in my home, everyone around me, including doctors, began insisting that I always carry at least one of the toys with me. One day, when my friend asked on the phone, "Do you have the Ankh-Pharaoh figurine with you?" before coming to my house, and canceled the visit when I said no, I realized something was wrong. Mrs. Winters lived in apartment 4B for over 40 years. Everyone in the building knew her, but few actually knew her. She was polite but distant, a wisp of a woman with silver hair who nodded hello in the hallway, but rarely engaged in conversation. The only notable thing about her was her collection of antique porcelain figurines, visible through her partially open door when she accepted deliveries. I'd lived across the hall in 4A for just 6 months when she died. The building manager found her. Mr. Chen said she'd passed peacefully in her sleep at the remarkable age of 97. I sent flowers to the funeral service out of neighborly courtesy, though I didn't attend. So no one was more surprised than me when Mr. Chen knocked on my door a week after her death. "Mrs. Winters left something for you," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Her lawyer will be delivering it tomorrow. She was very specific that you should have it." Me? But I barely knew her. The next morning, a smartly dressed lawyer arrived with documents for me to sign and 4 large boxes. Mrs. Winters was quite insistent that her collection go to you, Ms. Hoffman explained. She called me just 2 weeks before her passing to make the arrangements. But why me? She said you would understand their needs. I assumed you were a fellow collector. The boxes contained 37 figurines, each wrapped carefully in acid-free tissue paper. They were beautiful in an unsettling way. Porcelain figures ranging from 6 to 14 inches tall, mostly of women and children in Victorian-era clothing. Each had a name written on the bottom in faded ink: Sophia, Ankh-Pharaoh, Mirabelle, Theodore. I arranged them on my bookshelves and windowsills, not knowing what else to do with them. That's when things began to change. The first incident occurred 3 days later. I ran into my neighbor from 2C in the lobby. We'd never been particularly friendly, just nodding acquaintances. But that morning she approached me with unusual warmth. "I heard you received Eliza's collection," she said. "How wonderful that they have a new home." Which one do you carry? The question confused me. Carry? She looked surprised, then embarrassed. Oh, I just assumed. Eliza always carried one with her, usually Theodore. Later that day, the mailman stopped me as I collected my mail. You're the new caretaker, he said, nodding approvingly. Good, good. They need someone in the building. Which one speaks to you most? Before I could respond, he leaned in conspiratorially. I recommend Ankfara for beginners. She's the most forgiving. At my doctor's appointment the following day, Dr. Reeves fixed me with an intent look after checking my vitals. I understand you've taken over Eliza Winters's collection. I blinked in surprise. How did you know that? News travels. Small community. He wrote something on his prescription pad. I strongly recommend you keep one with you at all times, particularly during transition periods, dawn, dusk, traveling. He tore off the prescription and handed it to me. Instead of medication, it read, "Carry Ankfara first, others will make themselves known." The strangest encounter happened at the grocery store. The cashier, a teenager I'd never seen before, looked up as she scanned my items, her eyes widening. "You're alone?" she whispered, looking genuinely afraid. "Excuse me? You're the one from the Hargrove building, with the collection. You can't go out unprotected." She glanced around, then quickly slipped a piece of paper into my bag. "My grandmother wrote this down. The rules. Please follow them." At home, I examined the paper. Written in shaky handwriting were 7 numbered instructions. Always carry one. Never leave home without a guardian. Rotate them. Each needs time to watch over you. Speak to them daily. They listen even when silent. Never break one. The consequences are severe. Keep them displayed where they can see all entrances. If one falls, it's a warning. Heed it. If one moves on its own, do not panic. It's protecting you. That night, my phone rang. It was Lisa, my closest friend, planning to visit the next day. "I'll come by around noon," she said. "Oh, wait. Do you have the Ankfara figure with you?" The question stopped me cold. Lisa didn't live in my building, didn't know my neighbors. I'd never mentioned the collection to her. "How do you know about Ankfara?" A pause. "Just heard you inherited some figurines, so do you have her with you?" "No, Lisa, they're decorative figurines. I don't carry them around." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't think I can make it tomorrow after all. Something came up." She hung up before I could respond. That was the moment I knew something was very wrong. The next morning, I found myself picking up the Ankfara figure before leaving for work. She was one of the smaller ones with delicate features, a blue dress and long black hair. I felt ridiculous slipping her into my bag, but the moment I stepped into the hallway with her, the atmosphere changed. Mrs. Diaz from 3A, who had never spoken to me before, smiled warmly. "Good choice," she said, nodding at my bag, though Ankfara wasn't visible. "She'll keep you safe on the subway." The entire day continued like this. A homeless man outside my office building called out, "She likes poetry, you know, the little one you're carrying." When I returned home, I placed Ankfara back on the shelf. As an experiment, I picked up a different figure, Mirabelle, a red-haired in a green dress, and carried her to the corner store. The experience was markedly different. People avoided me, crossing the street rather than passing close by. The store owner looked nervous, refusing to take money directly from my hand. "Wrong choice for nighttime," he muttered. "Theodore or Sophia after sunset." When I opened my apartment door, I stopped short. Ankfara was no longer where I'd left her. She was on the coffee table in the center of the room. I was certain I hadn't moved her. I lived alone. No one else had keys. Heart pounding, I carefully returned Mirabelle to her original spot, then picked up Ankfera. As I examined her, I nearly dropped her, my fingers suddenly slippery on the porcelain. When I looked down, I saw a dark liquid seeping from the figurine's eyes, like tears, but thicker, darker. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard a faint tinkling like porcelain gently touching porcelain. I turned on the light. 3 of the figurines had changed positions. Theodore now faced the front door, Sophia, the window, Ankfera, the bedroom. I told myself I was losing my mind. But in the morning, they remained in their new positions. I called in sick to work and went to the building manager's office. Mr. Chen didn't seem surprised to see me. "What are these things?" I demanded. "Why is everyone insisting I carry them?" The collection has been in this building for over 90 years through 4 different caretakers. Mrs. Winters was the longest serving, nearly 41 years. Caretakers? They're figurines, not pets. They're protectors, Ms. Carson, guardians. I don't know their full history. That knowledge belongs to the caretakers alone. But I know they keep this building and everyone in it safe. Safe from what? There was an incident in 1931 before the figurines came. Half the building's residents died in a single night. The survivor who brought the collection here left detailed journals. They're passed from caretaker to caretaker. Mrs. Winters didn't give me any journals. She hid them somewhere in her apartment. You need to look before the new tenant moves in next week. I found it behind the bathroom mirror, a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. The entries dated back to 1931, written by someone named Margaret Sullivan. According to Margaret, the deaths weren't from a gas leak, but something she called the visitors, entities that slipped through thin places in reality and fed on human life force. The figurines were somehow able to detect these entities and prevent them from entering. Each figurine contained a binding, implying that the figurines weren't just detectors, but actual prisons. The most disturbing passage came at the end. They must never be destroyed. Each contains what it has captured, held in fragile balance. The collection must remain together with the caretaker who carries them in rotation. This maintains the bindings. Should the collection be separated or the carrying ritual stopped, they will eventually awaken and seek release. I returned to my apartment around midnight. When I opened my door, I gasped. All 37 figurines had moved. They were arranged in a perfect circle in the center of my living room, all facing outward as if standing guard. In the center of the circle was a new figurine, one I'd never seen before. It had my face. For a long moment, I stood frozen. Then I felt a draft. A window was open, one I was certain I'd closed. On the windowsill were scratches, fresh ones, like claw marks. Something had tried to get in, and the figurines had stopped it. I approached the circle carefully. The figurine with my face was cruder than the others, less finished. When I reached for it, a sharp pain pricked my finger. Blood welled up, falling onto the figurine. The drop vanished, absorbed into the porcelain. The message was clear. I was being invited to join them, to become a permanent part of the collection, not just its caretaker. I tried to move, but the restraints bit into my wrists, thick rope expertly tied. My head throbbed with each pulse of that strange heartbeat coming from somewhere behind the walls. How long had I been unconscious? The basement was dimly lit by candles placed in a perfect circle around me. Their flickering light bounced off the dozens of small mirrors hanging from the ceiling, creating dancing reflections across the concrete floor. Each mirror was positioned at a slightly different angle, all aimed to capture my face from every possible perspective. I remembered dinner with the Wheelers. They seemed so normal when I answered their rental ad 3 weeks ago. A middle-aged couple offering a too-good-to-be-true monthly rate for a furnished room in their Victorian house. They explained they simply enjoyed having someone else in their big, empty home. I should have questioned why their previous tenants never stayed longer than a month. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the basement. "Mr. Wheeler, Mrs. Wheeler, is anyone there?" Only the steady thump, thump, thump from within the walls answered me. I scanned the room for anything that might help. The basement walls were lined with shelves containing mason jars filled with dark liquid. In the corner stood an old wooden table covered with strange implements, knives with curved blades, bowls made of what looked like bone, and small bottles filled with powders of various colors. The floor beneath me was painted with intricate symbols in dark red. I didn't want to consider what substance had been used to create them. My attention was drawn to a leather-bound book open on a pedestal near the table. From my position, I could just make out drawings of human figures surrounded by mirrors. The text was in a language I didn't recognize, symbols rather than letters. A door creaked open at the top of the basement stairs. Light spilled down as 2 silhouettes appeared. "Ah, you're awake." Mrs. Wheeler's voice was exactly as I remembered it, soft, almost maternal. "We were beginning to worry the wine was too strong." The Wheelers descended the stairs together, moving with perfect synchronization. They still looked like the pleasant couple who had served me dinner. Mr. Wheeler with his neatly trimmed beard and sweater vest, Mrs. Wheeler with her floral dress and pearl necklace. Yet something was different. Their movements were too fluid, too coordinated, as if they were puppets controlled by the same hand. "What is this? Why am I tied up?" I struggled against the restraints. "Please don't exert yourself," Mr. Wheeler said, his voice concerned as if this were a normal situation. "The preparation must be perfect, and we wouldn't want you to harm yourself before the alignment." Preparation? Alignment? What are you talking about? Mrs. Wheeler smiled gently as she adjusted one of the mirrors above me. "We've been searching for so long. Do you know how rare it is to find someone with the perfect resonance? When you walked into our house, we knew immediately. Your frequency matches perfectly." My frequency? I was becoming more confused and terrified by the second. "Everyone vibrates at a certain frequency," Mr. Wheeler explained, as casually as if discussing the weather. "Most people are out of tune with the universe. But you," he placed a cold hand on my shoulder, "you resonate at exactly the right pitch to open the doorway." The heartbeat in the walls grew louder. "We've tried with 17 others," Mrs. Wheeler said, her smile never wavering. "None were quite right. Close, but not perfect. We had to return them to the cycle and try again." My eyes darted to the mason jars on the shelves. The dark liquid seemed to pulse in rhythm with the heartbeat. "Tonight is the night of perfect alignment," Mr. Wheeler continued. "The stars are positioned exactly as they need to be. And now we have you, the final component." Mrs. Wheeler approached with a small bowl containing dark red paint. She dipped her finger in and began drawing symbols on my forehead. "Don't worry," she whispered. "You won't be gone entirely. A part of you will remain with us forever. The rest will serve a greater purpose." The heartbeat grew faster, louder. The mirrors began to vibrate slightly, creating a soft tinkling sound that harmonized with the pulsing. "Who are you people?" I asked, my voice shaking. The Wheelers exchanged a glance and smiled in perfect unison. "We aren't people," Mr. Wheeler said. "Not anymore. Not for a very long time." "We are simply vessels," Mrs. Wheeler added, "just as you will be." She stepped back to admire her handiwork on my forehead. "Perfect. The sigil is complete." Mr. Wheeler moved to the pedestal and began reading from the book, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that matched the heartbeat in the walls. The language was nothing I had ever heard before, guttural and flowing at the same time, with sounds no human throat should be able to produce. As he chanted, the mirrors above me began to rotate slowly, catching the candlelight and sending it dancing across the room. The symbols on the floor started to glow with a dull red light. I pulled desperately at my restraints, feeling the rope dig into my skin. One of the knots seemed slightly looser than the others. If I could just... Mrs. Wheeler noticed my struggle and placed a firm hand on my arm. "Please don't resist. It will only make the transition more difficult." "What transition? What are you going to do to me?" "We aren't going to do anything to you," she said, her voice gentle. "We're going to do something with you. There's a difference." The heartbeat reached a fever pitch, now so loud it felt like it was coming from inside my own chest. The mirrors spun faster, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of light. Mr. Wheeler's chanting grew louder, more intense. Mrs. Wheeler joined in, their voices blending in perfect harmony. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate with each syllable. I worked frantically at the loose knot, feeling it give slightly, just a little more. A crack appeared in the wall directly in front of me, not a structural crack, but something else, a line of pure darkness splitting the concrete. It widened as the chanting intensified, revealing not the earth behind the foundation, but a void of absolute blackness. Something moved within that darkness, something massive. The Wheelers' chanting reached a crescendo. The mirrors spun so quickly they were a blur of light. The heartbeat was now so loud it drowned out all other sound. With a final desperate effort, I loosened the knot enough to free my right hand. While the Wheelers were focused on the widening crack, I quickly untied my other restraints. Just as I freed myself, the crack split open completely. The darkness poured out like liquid shadow, coalescing into a shape too bizarre for my mind to comprehend. Angles that shouldn't exist, dimensions that folded in on themselves. The Wheelers fell to their knees, arms outstretched in welcome. "The gateway is open," Mr. Wheeler intoned. "The vessel is prepared," Mrs. Wheeler added. I took advantage of their distraction and bolted for the stairs. Behind me, I heard a sound that could have been either joy or agony as the darkness engulfed the Wheelers. I reached the top of the stairs and yanked at the door. Locked. Of course it was locked. The darkness was spreading across the basement floor, climbing the walls, reaching tendrils toward the stairs. The mirrors had stopped spinning and now all reflected the same image. Not my face, but something else. Something watching. I spotted a small window near the ceiling, likely a coal chute from when the house was first built. It was my only chance. I grabbed a heavy wrench from a tool shelf and smashed the window. Cold night air rushed in as I cleared away the broken glass. The opening was small, but I was desperate. Behind me, the darkness had reached the bottom of the stairs. From within its depths, I heard voices, not just the Wheelers now, but others, many others, all calling my name. I squeezed through the window, scraping my shoulders and back on the remaining shards of glass. I tumbled onto the grass outside, the cool night air a shock after the stifling basement. I ran without looking back, not stopping until I reached the main road. Only then did I turn to look at the house. From the outside, it appeared perfectly normal. Lights shone warmly in the windows. There was no sign of the horror inside. As I watched, the front door opened. Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler stood in the doorway, smiling and waving at me. They looked exactly the same, yet somehow I knew they weren't the same people, or whatever, that had tied me to that chair. "Please come back," Mrs. Wheeler called, her voice carrying impossibly across the distance. "We're not finished yet. The alignment is still perfect," Mr. Wheeler added. "The doorway remains open.